Welcome to the Sleepy Mind channel. Tonight, we will explore why we sleepwalk, why some people quietly rise from bed while still asleep, and how the human brain can sometimes exist in a strange state somewhere between sleeping and waking at the same time. We will look at what happens inside the sleeping brain, why certain people are more likely to sleepwalk than others, how awareness can become strangely divided during deep sleep, and why this unusual condition has fascinated human beings for centuries. Sleepwalking feels impossible because it challenges one of the most basic assumptions people have about sleep itself. Most people imagine sleep as a complete separation from the outside world, where awareness fades away and the body remains still until morning arrives. Yet every night somewhere in the world, people stand up from their beds, walk through dark houses, open doors, move objects, whisper short phrases, and sometimes carry out surprisingly complex actions while still remaining asleep. By morning, many of them remember absolutely nothing at all. The experience feels unsettling because the sleeping person may appear awake at first glance, while something important behind the eyes still remains absent and unreachable. If you enjoy videos like these, feel free to like and subscribe. More videos are posted weekly, and you can also explore the playlists for hours of calm nighttime listening, covering science, history, nature, space, and many other fascinating topics designed for sleep and relaxation. For thousands of years, people struggled to explain sleepwalking because no ordinary explanation seemed capable of making sense of it. Ancient cultures often connected sleepwalking with moonlight, hidden forces, spiritual influence, or mysterious nighttime energy moving through the mind. Even the old medical word, somnambulism, carries a strange feeling when spoken aloud because it sounds almost more poetic than scientific. Long before modern neuroscience existed, people understood there was something unusual about a person calmly walking through the world while remaining trapped inside sleep. Modern science approaches sleepwalking very differently, yet the scientific explanation may be even stranger than the old myths themselves. Researchers now believe the brain does not always move smoothly between sleeping and waking states. Instead, different systems inside the brain may shift unevenly, almost like sections of a city slowly regaining electricity after a blackout, while other neighborhoods remain completely dark. Certain areas connected to movement may begin activating before full awareness returns, while deeper regions linked to memory and conscious thought may remain heavily asleep underneath. That unevenness is one of the most important ideas in modern sleep research, because many people unconsciously imagine the brain as a single machine that simply turns on or off all at once. Real sleep appears more complicated than that. The human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons communicating through vast electrical networks, and every night, those networks cycle through changing stages of sleep with remarkable precision. Brain waves slow down, breathing patterns shift, memories become reorganized, hormones change, and large systems throughout the body enter carefully regulated states of restoration. Most of the time, these transitions happen quietly, without any unusual behavior at all. Yet sleep itself is not a stable condition. Scientists now understand that sleep contains layers and changing depths rather than one single uninterrupted state of unconsciousness. During certain periods, the brain enters extremely deep stages of rest, where awareness becomes reduced and the body normally remains still. In some people, however, those deep stages can briefly become unstable. Instead of fully waking, the brain may enter a strange middle condition where movement systems partially activate while conscious awareness remains deeply limited. Some researchers describe sleepwalking as a mixed state of consciousness because the sleeper may be neither fully awake nor fully asleep. That idea sounds contradictory at first because human beings naturally prefer clean categories. A person is usually considered awake or asleep, aware or unaware, active or resting. Sleepwalking challenges those divisions because the body may move through physical space while awareness remains deeply incomplete. The result creates one of the strangest experiences in all human biology, where someone can appear present while large parts of the conscious mind remain somewhere else entirely. Imagine walking through your own home late at night with every light switched off, while still knowing where the walls and furniture stand. Most people could probably navigate familiar rooms almost automatically, because the brain stores deeply learned movement patterns over many years of repetition. Human beings already experience small examples of automatic behavior constantly during ordinary life. Someone may drive a familiar road and suddenly realize they remember very little about the previous several minutes, because routine movement patterns quietly handled much of the process underneath conscious thought. A person may walk into the kitchen and begin preparing coffee before fully waking in the morning. Sleepwalking appears to involve some of those automatic systems operating under far stranger conditions, while awareness itself remains trapped inside deep sleep. Part of what makes sleepwalking feel so eerie to observers is the mixture of familiarity and absence. The eyes of a sleepwalker may remain open. They may avoid obstacles, respond with short phrases, or move calmly through rooms with surprising coordination. From a distance, they can appear awake enough to hold a conversation, even though awareness remains greatly reduced. Family members often describe the experience as unsettling because the familiar person standing before them seems physically present yet psychologically distant at the same time. It creates the strange impression of meeting someone who is both there and not fully there all at once. Scientists classify sleepwalking as something known as a parasomnia. A parasomnia is an unusual behavior that happens during sleep. Sleepwalking is one of the best known examples, though sleep talking, night terrors, and certain other strange nighttime conditions belong to similar categories. These disorders reveal something important about the sleeping brain, because they show sleep is not always silent and inactive beneath the surface. Quiet bedrooms may contain enormous neurological activity hidden behind closed eyes and still bodies. While most sleepers remain motionless through the night, the brain itself continues carrying out countless complicated processes that scientists are still working to fully understand. One of the strangest parts of sleepwalking is the idea that the brain may be partly asleep and partly active at the same time. At first that sounds impossible, because people naturally imagine consciousness as a single unified condition. A person should either be awake or asleep, with nothing existing between those states. Yet modern sleep research suggests the human brain may not always follow such simple rules. Instead, different systems inside the brain can sometimes shift into different levels of activity unevenly, creating unusual conditions where movement, awareness, memory, and perception no longer operate together in their normal, coordinated way. Researchers sometimes compare sleepwalking to waking mechanisms flickering on inside deep sleep. The comparison is imperfect, yet it captures the strange instability of the condition surprisingly well. Imagine a large building late at night, where most floors remain dark and quiet, while a few isolated rooms suddenly light up for brief moments. Certain systems inside the building begin functioning, while the rest remains inactive and silent. Something similar may happen inside the sleeping brain during a sleepwalking episode. Regions connected to movement and simple navigation may partially activate, while deeper systems connected to full awareness continue resting underneath. That mixed condition helps explain why sleepwalking often appears so strange to observers. A sleepwalker may move calmly through familiar surroundings while remaining disconnected from conscious awareness. The body may perform actions that appear purposeful, even though the person is not fully experiencing the world in the normal waking sense. Some sleepwalkers quietly rearrange objects, walk through hallways, open doors, or sit upright in bed before lying back down again. Others may whisper short phrases or respond vaguely when spoken to. Yet afterward they often remember little or nothing at all, because the systems responsible for forming normal waking memories may still remain asleep during the episode. The idea of partial consciousness appears in smaller ways during ordinary life as well, though usually far less dramatic. Many people have experienced waking in the middle of the night and briefly feeling uncertain where they are before awareness fully returns. Others may silence an alarm clock in the morning and later remember almost nothing about doing it. A person may even hold a short conversation after waking while still feeling mentally distant and foggy moments later. These ordinary experiences reveal that consciousness does not always return all at once. Awareness can rise gradually in layers rather than instantly appearing fully formed. Sleepwalking seems to involve that gradual process becoming disrupted in a much deeper and more unusual way. Instead of the brain smoothly transitioning from deep sleep into wakefulness, some systems may activate before others are ready. Movement may arrive before awareness. Navigation may activate before conscious thought. The body begins operating while large portions of the mind still remain submerged beneath deep sleep. Scientists sometimes describe this as incomplete arousal because the brain begins waking without fully reaching ordinary consciousness. For many years, people believed sleepwalking involved dreams spilling into physical movement, almost like a person acting out vivid nighttime scenes while unconscious. Modern research now suggests that sleepwalking usually happens during very deep, non-dreaming sleep, rather than during the dreaming stages most people associate with vivid mental imagery. That discovery surprised many researchers because sleepwalking outwardly resembles someone physically acting out inner experiences. Instead, the condition appears more connected to unstable transitions within deep sleep itself. Deep sleep is one of the quietest and most restorative states the brain enters during the night. Brainwave activity slows dramatically while the body repairs tissue, restores energy, regulates hormones, and performs countless forms of internal maintenance. During these stages, awareness becomes reduced and outside information fades into the background. Most sleepers remain completely still throughout this period. Yet in some people, the brain briefly attempts to emerge from deep sleep without fully restoring conscious awareness. The result may produce the strange mixed condition recognized as sleepwalking. In some ways, the condition resembles an orchestra where only certain musicians begin playing while the conductor and much of the ensemble remain silent. A few sections suddenly become active, while the larger coordinated performance never fully begins. Movement systems may briefly carry out learned routines, while higher levels of awareness remain disconnected from the outside world. That comparison helps explain why sleepwalkers often perform simple, familiar actions rather than complicated reasoning tasks. The body appears to rely heavily on deeply practiced automatic behaviors already stored within the brain. Human beings depend on automatic behaviors constantly during waking life without fully noticing them. Typing on a keyboard, brushing teeth, climbing familiar stairs, preparing tea, or walking through a dark bedroom often happens with very little conscious effort, because the brain learns these routines over years of repetition. Much of everyday life quietly depends on systems operating beneath full conscious attention. Sleepwalking may partly expose how much automatic behavior the brain can carry out, even when awareness becomes severely limited. Observers often describe sleepwalkers as looking emotionally distant, even while physically active. The face may appear blank or unfocused. Responses may sound slow or strangely disconnected. Some sleepwalkers avoid obstacles smoothly, while remaining difficult to communicate with directly. Others stare ahead with open eyes, while appearing only dimly aware of nearby voices or surroundings. These behaviors reinforce the strange impression that only part of the person has entered the waking world, while another deeper part still remains elsewhere. One of the most surprising discoveries in modern sleep research is that sleepwalking usually does not happen during vivid dreaming sleep at all. Most people naturally assume a sleepwalker must be physically acting out dreams because the behavior appears so purposeful from the outside. A person may walk through rooms, move objects, speak softly, or react to parts of the environment while still remaining asleep. The behavior looks so unusual that many people imagine the sleeper must be deeply immersed inside an active dream world, guiding those movements from somewhere inside the mind. Yet scientists now understand that sleepwalking most often emerges from an entirely different stage of sleep. Human sleep moves through repeating cycles across the night, rather than remaining in one constant condition until morning arrives. These cycles involve several different stages, each with distinct brain activity, body responses, and levels of awareness. Some stages involve lighter forms of sleep, where outside sounds and disturbances may still be noticed fairly easily. Other stages become much deeper, pulling the brain farther away from ordinary awareness and conscious thought. Then there is REM sleep, the stage most strongly associated with vivid dreaming, emotional imagery, and complex mental experiences that can sometimes feel almost real while they are happening. During REM sleep, the brain becomes highly active in unusual ways. Heart rate may fluctuate, breathing patterns become less regular, and vivid dreams often unfold with remarkable detail and emotional intensity. Yet despite all this mental activity, the body itself usually remains temporarily immobilized. Scientists believe this temporary paralysis serves an important protective function because it helps prevent people from physically acting out dreams while asleep. In healthy REM sleep, the mind may feel active while the body remains largely still beneath the blankets. That fact makes sleepwalking especially fascinating, because the condition usually emerges during almost the opposite kind of sleep. Instead of appearing during highly active dreaming states, sleepwalking most often arises from deep, non-REM sleep, particularly during stages sometimes called slow-wave sleep. These are among the quietest and deepest forms of sleep the human brain enters during the night. Brainwave activity slows dramatically, while awareness sinks far below waking consciousness. If REM sleep resembles an active theater of vivid mental imagery, deep slow-wave sleep resembles a heavy, silent ocean where consciousness drifts far beneath the surface. Scientists first recognized this difference through sleep laboratory studies that carefully monitored electrical activity in the brain during nighttime sleep. Electrodes placed on the scalp allowed researchers to observe changing patterns of brain waves across different sleep stages. Over time, these studies revealed that sleepwalking episodes consistently appeared during deep, slow-wave sleep, rather than during REM dreaming periods. The discovery changed the scientific understanding of sleepwalking, because it suggested the condition was not primarily about dreams at all. Instead, it appeared connected to unstable transitions within deep unconscious sleep itself. Slow-wave sleep earns its name from the large, slow electrical patterns visible during brain monitoring. These waves move far more slowly than the faster activity associated with waking consciousness. During this stage, the brain reduces responsiveness to outside information, while the body carries out many important restorative processes. Growth hormones are released, tissues repair themselves, immune activity becomes regulated, and memories begin reorganizing beneath awareness. Many researchers consider slow-wave sleep one of the most physically restorative conditions the human body experiences. For most sleepers, this stage passes quietly each night, yet in some people the brain briefly attempts to emerge from deep, slow-wave sleep without fully restoring awareness. The result may create the mixed condition recognized as sleepwalking. Movement systems partially activate, while large portions of consciousness remain deeply submerged. In simple terms, the body begins waking before the mind fully catches up. That possibility helps explain why sleepwalking behavior often appears oddly automatic rather than emotionally dramatic. Dreams during REM sleep may involve intense emotional narratives, vivid imagery, unusual conversations, or bizarre, impossible events. Sleepwalking episodes, by contrast, usually involve simpler behaviors connected to familiar environments and learned routines. A person may walk into another room, rearrange objects, sit upright in bed, or quietly wander through hallways rather than acting out elaborate dream scenarios. The movements often appear calm, repetitive, and strangely mechanical, because the sleeper may not be consciously experiencing a rich dream world during the episode at all. Many people still confuse sleepwalking with conditions where dreams are physically acted out more directly. There are certain rare sleep disorders connected to REM sleep where dream paralysis becomes incomplete, allowing sleepers to physically move during vivid dreams. Those disorders differ from ordinary sleepwalking in important neurological ways, even though both conditions may appear unusual from the outside. Sleepwalking itself generally belongs to deep non-REM sleep, an incomplete arousal rather than dream enactment. This distinction matters because it changes how scientists understand the condition. Sleepwalking becomes less about imagination and more about unstable transitions inside deep unconscious sleep. Researchers now focus heavily on the mechanisms controlling arousal, movement, awareness, and brain coordination during these deep stages. The condition reveals how difficult it can be for the brain to move cleanly between states of consciousness that most people assume are separate. Imagine a person slowly surfacing upward through deep water before fully reaching the surface. Part of the body begins emerging, while another part still remains submerged below. Sleepwalking may resemble something similar happening neurologically inside the brain. Certain systems connected to movement and navigation begin rising toward wakefulness, while awareness itself remains trapped deeper below. The sleeper exists briefly inside an unusual middle condition, where waking and sleeping overlap imperfectly. Researchers believe deep slow-wave sleep may create ideal conditions for these unstable transitions because awareness during this stage already becomes so reduced. The brain operates differently than it does during lighter sleep or full wakefulness. Large networks of neurons synchronize into slower rhythms, while outside responsiveness decreases significantly. If arousal mechanisms begin activating unevenly during this period, the result may produce partial wakefulness without complete consciousness. Scientists continue studying why certain individuals become more vulnerable to these incomplete arousal states than others. Genetics, fatigue, stress, sleep deprivation, illness, and irregular sleep schedules may all influence how stable deep sleep remains across the night. In many cases, sleepwalking appears when the sleeping brain becomes pushed toward instability while transitioning between different levels of unconsciousness and wakefulness. Deep, slow-wave sleep is often described as one of the quietest conditions the human brain experiences during the entire night. During this stage, electrical activity across the brain slows into large, rolling patterns that move with remarkable synchronization. Breathing becomes steadier, heart rate slows, muscles relax, and awareness of the outside world fades dramatically. Many scientists believe this stage plays an important role in physical restoration because the body carries out countless forms of repair and recovery, while consciousness remains reduced beneath the surface. For most sleepers, slow-wave sleep passes peacefully without interruption. The body remains still while the brain cycles through its nightly rhythms until lighter stages of sleep gradually return closer to morning. Yet in some people, this deep stage may become unstable for brief moments. Instead of smoothly transitioning toward wakefulness, the brain may enter an incomplete state somewhere between sleeping and waking. Researchers often describe sleepwalking as a disorder of arousal because the sleeping brain begins partially waking without fully restoring conscious awareness. The phrase disorder of arousal sounds highly technical at first, yet the underlying idea is surprisingly understandable when imagined in ordinary life. Most people have experienced moments where waking does not happen all at once. Someone may hear an alarm clock and reach toward it before fully understanding where they are. Another person may answer a question during the night and barely remember the conversation later. Consciousness often returns gradually rather than instantly. Sleepwalking appears to involve that gradual process, becoming disrupted on a much deeper neurological level, while the brain still remains trapped inside slow-wave sleep. Scientists believe arousal systems inside the brain normally function with remarkable coordination. As waking begins, awareness, perception, movement, memory, and attention rise together in organized ways until the person becomes fully conscious of the surrounding world. During sleepwalking, that coordination may briefly fail. Movement systems may activate while awareness remains reduced. The body begins operating before awareness fully returns. In simple terms, the sleeper may begin physically waking, while large portions of the mind still remain asleep underneath. This incomplete awakening helps explain many of the strange behaviors associated with sleepwalking. A person may sit upright in bed, walk calmly through familiar surroundings, move objects from place to place, or quietly open doors without fully understanding what they are doing. These actions often appear purposeful from the outside because the brain still retains access to deeply learned movement patterns and spatial memory. Yet higher levels of reasoning and conscious reflection remain severely limited during the episode. Imagine an airport late at night where only a small number of systems suddenly switch back on while most of the building remains dark and quiet. A few conveyor belts begin moving again. Certain automatic doors start functioning. Some lights flicker back to life in isolated areas, while the majority of the airport still remains inactive and empty. Sleepwalking may resemble something similar happening neurologically inside the brain. Certain systems connected to movement and navigation partially activate while larger networks tied to conscious awareness remain reduced. That uneven activation creates one of the strangest experiences in all sleep science, because the sleeper may appear awake enough to move through the environment while still lacking ordinary conscious understanding. Observers often describe sleepwalkers as looking distant or emotionally absent, despite remaining physically active. The eyes may stay open and focused enough to avoid obstacles, yet the person seems disconnected from normal awareness at the same time. Conversations during episodes are usually brief, confused, or strangely limited because the systems responsible for full waking thought may still remain partly dormant. Researchers studying sleepwalking have discovered that the condition often occurs during the first part of the night, when slow-wave sleep tends to be strongest and deepest. Early nighttime sleep usually contains larger amounts of these deep restorative stages, which may help explain why many sleepwalking episodes happen relatively soon after falling asleep, rather than closer to morning. As the night continues, sleep cycles gradually shift toward lighter stages and longer REM periods associated with dreaming. The deeper scientists investigate slow-wave sleep, the more extraordinary it appears. During waking life, billions of neurons constantly exchange information through rapidly changing electrical activity. Deep slow-wave sleep looks dramatically different. Large groups of neurons begin synchronizing together into slower coordinated rhythms visible during brain recordings. Some researchers compare this synchronized activity to crowds of people moving together in enormous coordinated waves. Awareness of the outside world becomes heavily muted, while the brain enters one of its most internally focused conditions. Yet even in these deep stages, the brain never fully shuts down. The sleeping mind continues regulating breathing, monitoring the body, maintaining temperature, organizing memories, processing emotional information, and responding selectively to important signals from the environment. Parents may sleep through distant traffic sounds, yet wake instantly to the cry of a child in another room. The brain remains active beneath sleep, even while awareness becomes reduced. Sleepwalking may partly emerge when certain systems reactivate unevenly during this delicate balance between unconsciousness and environmental responsiveness. Some researchers believe sleepwalking reveals just how flexible and layered consciousness truly is. People often think of awareness as one unified experience, yet the sleeping brain suggests consciousness may consist of many interconnected systems working together simultaneously. Under ordinary conditions, those systems remain coordinated smoothly enough that consciousness feels continuous and stable. During incomplete arousal states, however, the seams become briefly visible. Movement, awareness, memory, and decision-making stop operating together in perfect synchronization. In many ways, sleepwalking also reveals how much human behavior normally depends on deeply learned automatic systems operating quietly beneath conscious thought. People often imagine every action as carefully directed by awareness, yet countless routines throughout ordinary life happen with very little deliberate attention at all. Walking through familiar rooms, climbing stairs, brushing teeth, typing on keyboards, or preparing breakfast often relies heavily on movement patterns stored through years of repetition. Sleepwalking may expose how powerfully those automatic systems can function even when higher consciousness remains reduced. One of the most remarkable aspects of sleepwalking is how physically capable a person can appear while still remaining asleep. Many people imagine sleepwalking as nothing more than someone slowly wandering through a hallway with closed eyes and outstretched arms, almost like an old scene from a black and white film. Real sleepwalking usually looks very different. Most sleepwalkers move in surprisingly ordinary ways. They may sit upright in bed, stand quietly for a few moments, walk calmly through familiar rooms, adjust blankets, move objects, open doors, or carry out small routine actions while remaining trapped inside a deeply altered state of awareness. Some episodes last only a few seconds before the sleeper quietly returns to bed. Others continue for several minutes and involve more complicated behavior than most people expect. A person may walk into another room and begin rearranging objects without any clear purpose. Some sleepwalkers have been known to put on clothing, search through drawers, eat food in the kitchen, or attempt simple household tasks while remaining largely disconnected from waking consciousness. These episodes can appear surprisingly organized from the outside because the brain still retains access to deeply learned movement patterns and familiar routines, even while higher awareness remains reduced. Scientists believe much of this behavior depends on automatic systems already built into the brain through years of repetition and habit. Human beings rely on learned routines constantly throughout daily life, without fully noticing how automatic many actions become over time. A person can often navigate familiar hallways in darkness, type on a keyboard while barely looking at their hands, or prepare morning coffee while still feeling mentally half asleep, because deeply practiced behaviors eventually require far less conscious effort. Sleepwalking appears to draw heavily from those same automatic systems operating beneath full awareness. Imagine visiting your own kitchen in complete darkness during the middle of the night. Even without turning on lights, most people could probably avoid bumping into furniture because the brain quietly stores detailed spatial maps of familiar environments. Sleepwalkers often rely on this same familiarity while moving through homes during episodes. The body may continue performing routine movements almost automatically because those pathways have been practiced thousands of times before. That familiarity helps explain why sleepwalkers often navigate ordinary surroundings more smoothly than observers might expect. Despite this appearance of coordination, however, awareness during sleepwalking remains severely limited. The person is not experiencing the environment in the same fully conscious way they would during waking life. Responses may appear slow, confused, emotionally flat, or strangely disconnected because major portions of conscious processing still remain asleep. A sleepwalker may answer questions with short, vague phrases while showing little genuine understanding of the situation around them. Others may not respond at all, despite keeping their eyes open and continuing to move. The open eyes of sleepwalkers often create one of the most unsettling parts of the condition for family members and observers. Many people assume someone who can see obstacles and walk around furniture must surely be awake. Yet sleepwalking demonstrates that the brain can process certain forms of visual and spatial information without restoring full awareness. The eyes may gather enough environmental information to guide movement through familiar spaces, even while deeper reflective thought remains disconnected. This strange mixture of movement and absence has fascinated observers for centuries because it creates the impression of witnessing only part of a person present at one time. Family members often describe sleepwalkers as looking emotionally distant or vacant despite remaining physically active. The person may move calmly through the house while appearing unreachable in some deeper psychological sense. It can feel almost as though the body has temporarily separated from the ordinary conscious personality usually associated with it. Some sleepwalking episodes become especially memorable because of the unusual behaviors people perform during them. Public stories about dramatic sleepwalking incidents often receive enormous attention because they seem almost unbelievable. Yet scientists caution that most episodes remain relatively simple and harmless. Walking through rooms, sitting upright in bed, moving blankets, or quietly wandering through familiar areas tends to be far more common than highly elaborate behavior. The public imagination naturally gravitates toward rare dramatic cases, though ordinary sleepwalking usually appears much quieter and less theatrical in reality. Even simple episodes, however, can become dangerous under certain conditions because awareness remains impaired throughout the event. Sleepwalkers may accidentally trip, bump into furniture, leave the house, or interact with potentially hazardous objects without fully understanding what they are doing. Researchers therefore place strong emphasis on safety for individuals who experience frequent episodes. Families may lock doors, secure windows, remove dangerous obstacles, or create calmer sleep environments to reduce potential risks during the night. One of the most mysterious parts of sleepwalking is not the walking itself, but the absence of memory afterward. By morning, many sleepwalkers wake with no awareness that anything unusual happened during the night at all. Family members may describe conversations, wandering behavior, open doors, or objects moved around the house while the sleepwalker listens with complete confusion. Some people only discover they sleepwalk because someone else witnesses an episode. Others notice strange clues the next morning, such as lights switched on, blankets moved, kitchen cabinets left open, or objects resting in unusual places without any explanation for how they got there. This absence of memory often feels strange to people because memory normally creates the sense of continuity running through ordinary life. Human beings move through each day, collecting experiences into an ongoing internal narrative. Conversations, emotions, locations, and actions become woven together into the feeling of a continuous conscious self traveling through time. Sleepwalking interrupts that continuity. Actions may occur physically in the world, while the conscious mind later retains no stable record of the experience at all. Scientists believe this memory loss happens because normal waking consciousness never fully activates during the episode. The brain systems responsible for storing experiences into long-term memory may remain reduced, while movement systems temporarily activate underneath. In simple terms, the body may perform actions without the brain fully recording those actions into ordinary awareness. The result creates the eerie possibility of movement and behavior occurring outside the normal sense of personal awareness people depend on every day. Researchers sometimes compare sleepwalking to a body moving without a fully active narrator present inside the mind. The comparison is not perfect scientifically, yet it captures the unusual partial quality of the condition remarkably well. During waking life, people experience an ongoing inner awareness, constantly interpreting events, making decisions, storing memories, and maintaining the feeling of being consciously present within each moment. Sleepwalking appears to interrupt parts of that process, while allowing automatic behavior to continue underneath. Human beings already experience smaller examples of partial awareness during normal life more often than they realize. Someone may arrive home after driving a familiar route and suddenly recognize they remember very little about the journey itself because routine movement patterns quietly handled much of the task automatically. A person may read several pages of a book while distracted and later realize they absorbed almost none of the information consciously. Another individual may complete familiar household tasks while mentally focused somewhere else entirely. These ordinary experiences suggest conscious awareness is not always as continuous or complete as people assume. Sleepwalking represents a far deeper and stranger version of this separation between action and reflective awareness. Instead of mild distraction or routine automatic behavior, the sleeping brain enters a condition where physical movement may continue while large portions of conscious thought remain trapped inside deep sleep. The body walks, navigates, speaks, or performs simple actions, while ordinary self-awareness remains fragmented or absent. This creates the unsettling feeling observers often describe when witnessing a sleepwalking episode. The sleepwalker may appear physically awake enough to move through the environment, while lacking the emotional presence and conscious responsiveness associated with waking life. Responses may sound distant or oddly flat. Facial expressions often appear blank or unfocused. The person may look directly at someone without fully recognizing or understanding the interaction taking place. Part of what makes this condition feel so unusual is that human beings naturally associate movement with intention and awareness. People tend to assume purposeful movement must always reflect deliberate conscious thought. Sleepwalking reveals that the brain can sometimes separate those systems far more than expected. Familiar movement patterns may continue functioning automatically even while reflective consciousness remains reduced. Imagine a theater stage where the scenery and machinery continue moving while the main performer never fully steps into the spotlight. The visible activity still unfolds, yet the central conscious presence people expect remains strangely absent. Sleepwalking may resemble something similar happening neurologically inside the brain. automatic systems connected to movement and navigation continue operating while deeper awareness fails to fully emerge from sleep. Scientists studying sleep and consciousness find this especially fascinating because it raises difficult questions about the true relationship between awareness and behavior. Much of daily life depends on automatic systems quietly functioning beneath conscious attention. Walking itself becomes largely automatic after early childhood. People rarely think deliberately about each muscle movement required to cross a room, because the brain handles those complex patterns automatically beneath awareness. Sleepwalking may expose how extensive these automatic systems truly are. The condition also highlights how layered memory formation can be inside the brain. Under normal waking conditions, experiences become organized into stable memories through complicated interactions between attention, awareness, emotion, and neural activity. During sleepwalking, many of these systems appear only partially active. The brain may process enough information to guide movement through familiar environments, while failing to create strong conscious memories afterward. Some sleepwalkers later describe vague dreamlike fragments rather than complete memories of episodes. Others remember isolated emotional impressions or disconnected images without understanding how they relate to actual events that occurred physically during the night. These fragments suggest some level of experience may still exist during episodes, even though conscious awareness remains severely incomplete. Researchers continue investigating exactly how awareness functions during sleepwalking, because consciousness itself remains one of the least understood subjects in all neuroscience. Brain imaging studies reveal that different regions of the brain may operate at different levels of activity simultaneously during altered states of consciousness. Certain movement and sensory systems may partially activate, while regions tied to reflective self-awareness remain reduced. Sleepwalking may therefore represent a condition where consciousness itself becomes unevenly distributed rather than fully present or absent. This blurred condition may also help explain why people throughout history often interpreted sleepwalking through supernatural or mystical ideas. Long before neuroscience existed, observers still recognized something profoundly unusual about a person moving through the world while appearing psychologically absent. Ancient myths involving spirits, moonlight, enchantment, or divided souls reflected attempts to explain behavior that seemed impossible within ordinary understanding of consciousness. Modern science replaces mythology with neurological explanations, yet the condition remains strange even under careful scientific study. Sleepwalking still reveals how flexible and layered the human mind may be beneath waking awareness. Consciousness may not function as one continuous unified state, but rather as many overlapping systems constantly coordinating together beneath the surface of experience. Sleepwalking is often associated with childhood because children experience the condition far more commonly than adults. Many parents first encounter sleepwalking when a child unexpectedly appears in the hallway late at night, stands quietly beside the bed, or wanders calmly through the house while still remaining asleep. These moments can feel startling at first because the child may appear awake enough to move around normally while still seeming strangely distant and unreachable at the same time. Yet despite how unusual these episodes appear, childhood sleepwalking is far more common than many people realize. Researchers estimate that millions of children experience at least occasional sleepwalking episodes while growing up. In many cases, the behavior remains brief and harmless before gradually disappearing over time. Some children may sleepwalk only once or twice, while others experience episodes repeatedly for several years. Parents often notice patterns where episodes become more likely during periods of exhaustion, illness, stress, irregular sleep schedules, or major changes in routine. Despite the unsettling appearance of the condition, most childhood sleepwalking eventually fades naturally as the brain matures. Scientists believe developing sleep systems may help explain why children appear especially vulnerable to sleepwalking and other unusual nighttime behaviors. Childhood sleep differs from adult sleep in several important ways, because the brain itself continues developing rapidly through early life. Young brains spend larger amounts of time in deep, slow-wave sleep compared with adults, and those deep stages appear closely connected to sleepwalking episodes. Since sleepwalking most often emerges from slow-wave sleep, the increased depth and intensity of childhood sleep may partly increase the likelihood of incomplete arousal states during the night. In many ways, childhood sleep resembles a system still learning stability through years of neurological development. The sleeping brain must coordinate enormous networks responsible for awareness, memory, movement, emotional regulation, breathing, and countless other functions simultaneously throughout the night. In children, these systems continue refining themselves over time, while sleep architecture gradually changes with age. Researchers believe this developmental process may temporarily create conditions where deep sleep becomes more vulnerable to unstable transitions between sleeping and waking. Imagine a large orchestra still learning to perform together smoothly. Most sections may already function beautifully, yet occasional moments of uneven timing or coordination still appear while the full performance matures. Scientists sometimes think childhood sleep may operate somewhat similarly. The brain already performs complex processes during sleep, yet certain systems connected to arousal and state transitions may remain less stable during development. Sleepwalking could partly reflect those temporary instabilities within a growing nervous system. This idea helps explain why many children eventually outgrow sleepwalking naturally without requiring major medical treatment. As the brain matures and sleep patterns gradually stabilize, incomplete arousal states may become less common. Deep sleep itself changes significantly across human life. Young children often experience especially powerful slow-wave sleep, while adults generally spend less time in the deepest stages compared with early childhood. These gradual developmental shifts may reduce the conditions most strongly associated with sleepwalking episodes. Parents witnessing sleepwalking for the first time often feel frightened because the behavior seems impossible and difficult to explain. A child may walk through the house with open eyes, speak briefly, or carry out simple actions while remaining asleep underneath. Yet most episodes remain relatively calm and harmless. Children often appear confused if awakened suddenly during an episode because consciousness has not fully returned yet. Researchers therefore usually recommend gently guiding children back toward bed rather than startling them awake abruptly unless immediate safety becomes necessary. The calmness of many childhood episodes further supports the idea that sleepwalking usually emerges from deep non-dreaming sleep rather than emotionally intense dream activity. Children may wander slowly through familiar environments with limited awareness, instead of reacting dramatically to imaginary threats or vivid dream scenes. The movements often appear automatic and disconnected rather than emotionally driven, because the sleeping brain remains caught in an incomplete state between deep sleep and wakefulness. Scientists have also noticed that sleepwalking and related conditions sometimes appear repeatedly within certain families. Parents who sleepwalked during childhood may later discover their own children experience similar episodes as well. This pattern strongly suggests genetics may influence vulnerability to sleepwalking in at least some individuals. Researchers continue studying which inherited biological traits may increase the likelihood of unstable arousal states during deep sleep. For many children, sleepwalking eventually becomes little more than a strange family memory, discussed years later with mild amusement. A parent may remember finding a child quietly standing in the hallway at midnight, or attempting to carry a blanket into another room while still asleep. Yet beneath these unusual moments lies a remarkable neurological process, revealing how layered and unstable the boundaries between sleep and wakefulness can sometimes become during human development. Scientists have become increasingly interested in the family patterns surrounding sleepwalking because the condition often appears across generations in surprisingly consistent ways. Many adults who sleepwalked as children later discover that their own sons, daughters, siblings, or parents experience similar nighttime behaviors as well. These repeated family connections strongly suggest that certain brains may naturally carry a greater biological tendency toward incomplete arousal states during deep sleep. Sleepwalking does not appear randomly in every population at equal rates. Instead, some families seem especially vulnerable to the condition, while others rarely experience it at all. Researchers studying inherited sleep traits believe genetics may influence how stable deep sleep remains throughout the night. Certain people may naturally possess nervous systems that transition more unevenly between sleep stages under specific conditions. The sleeping brain depends on enormous coordination between electrical signals, chemical messengers, arousal systems, memory networks, movement control, and countless other neurological processes functioning together with remarkable precision. Small inherited differences within these systems may increase the likelihood that partial awakenings occur during deep, slow-wave sleep. This does not mean sleepwalking is determined entirely by genetics alone. Human biology rarely works in such simple ways. Inherited traits often create vulnerability rather than certainty. A person may inherit greater sensitivity to certain conditions while still requiring environmental triggers before symptoms appear regularly. Sleepwalking seems to follow this same pattern. Genetics may shape the underlying tendency, while factors such as exhaustion, stress, illness, disrupted schedules, or emotional strain increase the likelihood of actual episodes occurring. Among these triggers, sleep deprivation appears especially important and surprisingly paradoxical. Most people naturally assume unusual nighttime behavior would become less likely when someone is extremely tired because exhaustion seems associated with heavier, deeper sleep. Yet researchers have repeatedly found that too little sleep may increase the likelihood of sleepwalking episodes in vulnerable individuals. The very thing people expect to stabilize sleep may instead make certain forms of unstable arousal more likely. At first, this sounds contradictory. though the explanation begins to make sense once the structure of deep sleep becomes better understood. When people become severely sleep-deprived, the brain often responds by entering deeper and more intense slow-wave sleep once rest finally begins. Scientists sometimes refer to this as sleep pressure building throughout periods of wakefulness. The longer a person remains awake, the stronger the brain's drive toward restorative deep sleep becomes. Once sleep finally arrives, slow-wave activity may increase significantly as the brain attempts to recover from accumulated exhaustion. This intensified deep sleep may partly explain why sleep deprivation sometimes increases sleepwalking episodes. The deeper and more powerful slow-wave sleep becomes, the greater the possibility that unstable transitions or incomplete arousals may occur in vulnerable brains. Instead of moving smoothly between deep sleep and wakefulness, the exhausted brain may become more prone to fragmented partial activation during the night. Imagine stretching a rubber band tighter and tighter throughout the day before finally releasing it all at once. The rebound becomes stronger because tension built gradually over time. Sleep deprivation may affect the sleeping brain somewhat similarly. The greater the accumulated exhaustion becomes, the more forcefully the brain attempts to enter restorative deep sleep afterward. In some individuals, this heightened intensity may destabilize normal sleep transitions and increase the likelihood of incomplete awakening. This relationship between sleep deprivation and sleepwalking reveals something important about the sleeping brain itself. Sleep is not simply passive unconsciousness, where the mind shuts down for several hours before restarting in the morning. Instead, sleep requires careful neurological balance and stability throughout constantly shifting cycles of activity. When that balance becomes disrupted through exhaustion, stress, or irregular schedules, the sleeping brain may struggle to maintain smooth transitions between different states of awareness. The paradox becomes even stranger when considering that exhausted people often fall asleep more quickly and deeply than usual. From the outside, deeper sleep appears beneficial and restorative, which it generally is under healthy conditions. Yet sleepwalking demonstrates that extremely deep sleep may also increase the possibility of unstable partial arousal in certain vulnerable individuals. The same restorative systems helping the brain recover may occasionally create conditions where waking and sleeping begin overlapping unevenly. Sleepwalking may partly emerge when this coordination becomes temporarily unstable under pressure from exhaustion or disrupted sleep patterns. Certain systems connected to movement and arousal begin activating, while conscious awareness remains reduced underneath. The result creates the strange condition where the body may move through familiar environments without full awareness ever properly returning. Scientists also believe sleep deprivation may reduce the brain's ability to maintain clear boundaries between sleep stages. Under healthy conditions, the brain transitions through organized sleep cycles with remarkable timing and structure. Exhaustion may increase fragmentation inside these cycles, creating more opportunities for unstable overlap between deep sleep and partial arousal states. In vulnerable individuals, these fragmented transitions may trigger sleepwalking episodes more easily. This idea helps explain why maintaining stable sleep schedules often becomes one of the most important recommendations for people prone to sleepwalking. Consistent sleep timing may help reduce instability within deep sleep by allowing the brain to maintain more predictable cycles across the night. Irregular schedules, severe fatigue, overnight shifts, and chronic sleep loss may all increase strain on systems already vulnerable to incomplete arousal. Family patterns and sleep deprivation together reveal that sleepwalking likely emerges through a combination of biological vulnerability and environmental pressure, rather than one single cause. Certain brains may naturally carry greater susceptibility, while exhaustion and disrupted sleep create conditions where incomplete arousal becomes more likely. The condition therefore reflects both inherited neurological tendencies and the constantly changing pressures affecting the sleeping brain throughout life. Stress has long been associated with unusual nighttime experiences, and sleepwalking appears no exception. Many people who experience sleepwalking episodes notice patterns where stressful periods of life seem to increase the likelihood of nighttime wandering, confused awakenings, or incomplete arousal states. Researchers continue studying exactly how emotional strain affects the sleeping brain, though evidence increasingly suggests that stress may destabilize normal sleep architecture in ways that make unusual transitions between sleeping and waking more likely in vulnerable individuals. Researchers believe this instability may partly explain why stressful periods sometimes increase sleepwalking episodes. Deep sleep depends on delicate coordination between enormous networks regulating awareness, arousal, memory, breathing, movement, and emotional processing simultaneously. Stress may interfere with this coordination by increasing nighttime arousal within systems that would normally remain calm and stable during deep sleep. The result may increase the likelihood that portions of the brain partially activate, while consciousness itself remains reduced underneath. Many people have experienced smaller examples of stress influencing sleep, without realizing how strongly emotions can shape nighttime physiology. Someone under pressure may wake repeatedly through the night, experience unusually vivid dreams, grind their teeth during sleep, or wake feeling exhausted despite spending many hours in bed. Stress changes the structure and stability of sleep itself. Sleepwalking may represent one of the more dramatic ways this instability occasionally reveals itself. Scientists also continue investigating the connection between fever and sleepwalking, because episodes sometimes appear more frequently during illness, especially in children. Fever creates significant physiological changes throughout the body, while the brain works to regulate temperature, immune responses, inflammation, and metabolic activity simultaneously. During these periods, sleep itself may become unusually restless or unstable. Children with fevers occasionally experience confused nighttime behaviors, partial awakenings, or episodes resembling sleepwalking, while remaining only partly aware of their surroundings. This connection between fever and incomplete arousal further supports the idea that sleepwalking emerges when normal deep sleep stability becomes disrupted. The sleeping brain functions within delicate physiological balance, and illness may temporarily interfere with that balance in ways that increase vulnerability to fragmented arousal states. Researchers believe fever may heighten nervous system instability during deep sleep, creating more opportunities for movement systems to partially activate before full awareness returns. Certain medications may also influence sleepwalking risk in some individuals. Scientists continue studying how different substances affect sleep architecture, because many medications alter brain chemistry, arousal thresholds, sleep depth, or transitions between sleep stages. Some medications appear capable of increasing, unusual nighttime behaviors in susceptible individuals by changing the balance between deep sleep and wakefulness. Others may intensify confusion during nighttime arousal or increase fragmentation within normal sleep cycles. The relationship between medications and sleepwalking highlights how chemically sensitive the sleeping brain truly is. Sleep depends on remarkably precise regulation involving neurotransmitters, hormones, electrical rhythms, and chemical signaling systems operating continuously throughout the night. Even small changes affecting these systems may alter how smoothly the brain transitions between different stages of consciousness. Researchers therefore study medication-related sleepwalking carefully to better understand which neurological systems help maintain stable boundaries between sleeping and waking. Irregular sleep schedules appear especially important as another major factor connected to sleepwalking. Human sleep follows powerful internal rhythms shaped by light exposure, daily routines, hormone cycles, and consistent timing patterns repeated over long periods. The brain functions best when these rhythms remain relatively stable from day to day. Sudden disruptions such as overnight work shifts, jet lag, inconsistent bedtimes, chronic sleep loss, or constantly changing schedules may place significant strain on systems regulating sleep architecture. Imagine a complicated clock constantly forced to reset itself at unpredictable hours. Over time, the internal timing mechanisms would likely become unstable and disorganized. Researchers believe irregular sleep schedules may affect the brain somewhat similarly. Stable sleep timing helps coordinate transitions between different stages of sleep across the night. Disrupted schedules may increase fragmentation within those transitions, creating more opportunities for incomplete arousal states to emerge. This helps explain why people working overnight schedules or frequently changing shifts sometimes report unusual nighttime experiences more often than individuals with stable routines. The brain evolved around relatively predictable cycles of darkness and daylight, repeated consistently over time. Modern lifestyles often place enormous pressure on those natural rhythms through artificial light, irregular schedules, long work hours, and chronic sleep restriction. Sleepwalking may partly reflect how sensitive the sleeping brain remains to disruptions in those deeply rooted biological patterns. Researchers studying these triggers often focus less on the specific trigger itself and more on what all these conditions share in common. Stress, fever, medications, sleep deprivation, and irregular schedules all appear capable of destabilizing deep sleep in different ways. They increase fragmentation, alter arousal thresholds, or disrupt the smooth coordination normally guiding the brain through nightly sleep cycles. Sleepwalking may therefore emerge when the boundaries separating deep sleep from wakefulness become temporarily weakened under pressure. This concept of destabilized sleep has become increasingly important in modern sleep science because it frames sleepwalking less as a mysterious, isolated behavior and more as a neurological state transition problem. Instead of asking only why people walk during sleep, researchers now investigate why the sleeping brain sometimes fails to move cleanly between levels of consciousness. The condition becomes part of a larger puzzle involving arousal regulation, sleep stability, and the architecture of awareness itself. When that stability becomes strained through stress, illness, exhaustion, medications, or disrupted schedules, unusual mixed states may occasionally emerge. Certain systems begin activating, while others remain asleep. movement may return before awareness fully rises. The sleeper enters a strange overlapping condition where waking and sleeping coexist imperfectly for brief moments during the night. This layered structure of sleep may be one of the most important discoveries in modern neuroscience because it changes the way consciousness itself is understood. Sleep does not behave like a simple on and off switch. The brain does not instantly shut down before later restarting all at once. Instead, consciousness rises and falls gradually through shifting states that overlap, interact, and sometimes blur together in unexpected ways. Sleepwalking exists inside one of those blurred regions where waking and sleeping briefly stop remaining fully separate conditions. Researchers studying sleep architecture often compare nighttime sleep to a landscape filled with changing terrain rather than one flat, unchanging condition. Some regions of sleep remain lighter and closer to waking awareness, while others become profoundly deep and internally focused. Throughout the night, the brain repeatedly cycles between these states with remarkable complexity. Brainwave activity changes, breathing patterns shift, heart rhythms fluctuate, hormones regulate themselves, memories reorganize, and awareness rises and falls in carefully coordinated patterns. Most of the time, these transitions unfold smoothly enough that people remain completely unaware of them. Sleep feels continuous from the inside, even though the brain may move through multiple dramatically different neurological states across the night. Yet conditions like sleepwalking reveal that the boundaries separating these states may not always remain stable. Under certain circumstances, fragments of one state may overlap with another instead of remaining cleanly separated. Scientists call these unusual overlaps mixed states because different systems inside the brain appear to operate at different levels of consciousness simultaneously. Some regions may remain asleep, while others begin partially activating toward wakefulness. Movement systems may emerge before reflective awareness returns. Sensory processing may partly reactivate, while memory systems remain reduced. Sleepwalking demonstrates that consciousness may be capable of fragmenting into uneven layers rather than functioning as one indivisible unified condition. Imagine standing on a shoreline during heavy fog, where land and ocean begin blending together without clear boundaries separating them. Shapes overlap softly, while familiar divisions become difficult to define precisely. Researchers sometimes think mixed states of consciousness may resemble something similar happening neurologically inside the brain. Waking and sleeping stop existing as perfectly separate territories and instead overlap within strange transitional regions for brief periods during the night. This blurred overlap helps explain why sleepwalking feels so difficult to categorize neatly. The sleepwalker is clearly not fully awake because awareness, memory, and conscious understanding remain severely limited. Yet the person is also not completely unconscious in the ordinary sense because movement, navigation, and environmental interaction still occur. Sleepwalking occupies a strange middle territory where ordinary definitions of waking and sleeping begin breaking down. Researchers have discovered that the brain already contains many forms of partial awareness, even outside sleepwalking itself. A person may drift halfway into sleep while still faintly hearing surrounding conversations. Someone waking from anesthesia may briefly move or speak before fully regaining awareness. Individuals experiencing extreme exhaustion may perform automatic behaviors while feeling mentally detached or foggy. These examples suggest consciousness naturally exists along a spectrum rather than inside only two separate states. Scientists studying these mixed states continue investigating which regions of the brain remain active and which remain suppressed during sleepwalking episodes. Brain imaging research suggests some movement-related systems may show increased activation, while regions involved in higher executive awareness remain reduced. In other words, the body may regain partial operational ability before the reflective awareness fully returns online. This separation between movement and awareness challenges many traditional assumptions about human behavior. Most people naturally associate physical action with conscious intention. Sleepwalking suggests the brain contains deeply automatic systems capable of functioning with surprisingly limited awareness under certain conditions. Familiar routines, navigation patterns, and learned motor behaviors may continue operating while reflective thought remains fragmented or absent. Mixed states also help explain why sleepwalking episodes often appear emotionally flat or strangely disconnected. The sleepwalker may move calmly through familiar environments without displaying the emotional complexity normally associated with full awareness. Responses may sound brief, confused, or distant because large portions of the brain responsible for self-awareness and reflective thinking still remain asleep. Researchers now believe these blurred states between sleeping and waking may be more common than previously understood. Sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, confusional arousals, lucid dreaming, night terrors, and certain anesthesia-related experiences all involve unusual combinations of awareness, paralysis, dreaming, movement, or perception overlapping in unexpected ways. Sleepwalking belongs to this larger family of conditions, revealing that consciousness itself may be more flexible and layered than waking life suggests. One of the most unsettling aspects of sleepwalking is how awake the person can appear from the outside. Many people imagine sleepwalkers moving with closed eyes and obvious confusion, almost like fictional portrayals from old films or cartoons. Real sleepwalking usually appears far more ordinary, and therefore far stranger. The eyes of a sleepwalker are often open during an episode. They may walk through familiar rooms without colliding into furniture, avoid obstacles, respond briefly to voices, or even glance toward people nearby, while still remaining deeply disconnected from conscious awareness. This open-eyed appearance creates powerful confusion for observers, because human beings instinctively associate open eyes with wakefulness and conscious presence. Eye contact normally signals awareness, recognition, and emotional connection between people. When someone looks directly at another person, the brain naturally assumes a conscious mind exists fully behind that gaze. Sleepwalking disrupts this expectation in unsettling ways, because the eyes may appear awake, while awareness itself remains severely incomplete. Family members who witness sleepwalking episodes often describe the experience using remarkably similar language even across different cultures and generations. Many say the sleepwalker looked physically present, yet psychologically distant at the same time. Others describe the person as seeming vacant, emotionally absent, or strangely unreachable, despite standing directly in front of them. Some compare the experience to speaking with someone whose attention exists somewhere far away, beyond ordinary awareness. This reaction reveals something important about how human beings interpret consciousness in one another. People constantly read faces, eyes, posture, movement, and emotional expression to determine whether another mind feels fully present and engaged. Sleepwalking creates discomfort because these signals stop aligning normally. The body moves and the eyes remain open, yet the emotional and reflective qualities associated with full waking awareness seem partially missing underneath. Observers often notice that sleepwalkers respond differently from fully awake individuals, even when carrying out ordinary movement. Responses may sound brief, flat, delayed, or strangely disconnected from the surrounding situation. A sleepwalker might answer a question with only a few vague words before continuing to move through the environment. Others may stare silently ahead, while appearing dimly aware of nearby voices without truly understanding them. These behaviors reinforce the strange impression that consciousness itself remains only partially present during the episode. Scientists believe this unusual appearance emerges because certain sensory and movement systems reactivate before full awareness returns. The eyes may gather enough information to guide navigation through familiar surroundings, even while higher levels of reflective thought remain reduced. In simple terms, the visual system may partly function without fully restoring the awareness people normally associate with seeing and understanding the world. Human beings already rely on unconscious visual processing constantly during ordinary life, without fully realizing it. People automatically avoid obstacles while walking, adjust body position without deliberate thought, and react to movement in peripheral vision almost instantly. Much of this processing happens beneath conscious awareness through deeply automatic neurological systems. Sleepwalking may partly reveal how powerfully these systems continue operating even when reflective consciousness remains incomplete. Imagine walking through your own home at night after waking briefly for water. Even in low light, most people could probably navigate familiar hallways with little conscious effort because the brain already contains detailed internal maps of the environment. Sleepwalkers appear to rely heavily on these learned spatial patterns while remaining disconnected from waking awareness. The body continues navigating familiar surroundings automatically, while the deeper conscious mind remains trapped somewhere between sleep and wakefulness. This separation between physical appearance and inner awareness may explain why sleepwalking has historically inspired so many supernatural interpretations. Long before neuroscience existed, observers still recognized something unusual about a person moving through the world while seeming psychologically absent. Open eyes combined with limited awareness created an eerie impression difficult to explain within ordinary understanding of consciousness. Ancient cultures often interpreted these episodes through ideas involving spirits, possession, enchantment, moonlight, or divided souls, because no simple explanation seemed capable of making sense of the behavior. Part of the discomfort may also come from the temporary disruption of ordinary social connection. Human beings depend heavily on facial expression, eye contact, tone of voice, and emotional responsiveness during communication. Sleepwalkers often display reduced emotional expression and limited engagement during episodes because the systems supporting full reflective interaction remain incomplete. A familiar face therefore appears strangely altered, not because the person has changed physically, but because important layers of awareness temporarily fail to fully emerge. Scientists continue investigating exactly how awareness functions during sleepwalking, because the condition reveals how difficult consciousness can be to define precisely. Open eyes and movement alone do not guarantee full awareness. Likewise, the absence of memory afterward strongly suggests reflective consciousness remains severely incomplete despite outward appearance. Sleepwalking therefore challenges simplistic ideas about what it truly means to be awake. Observers often describe the familiar face of a sleepwalker as seeming present yet absent, all at once, because in neurological terms, that description may contain some truth. Certain systems connected to movement and sensory processing partially emerge into wakefulness, while deeper reflective awareness remains reduced. The result creates one of the strangest experiences in all sleep science, where the appearance of wakefulness exists, without full conscious presence ever completely arriving. Long before scientists began placing electrodes on sleeping brains or studying electrical activity during the night, human beings were already fascinated by sleepwalking, because the condition seemed to belong somewhere between ordinary reality and something far stranger. Across many cultures and centuries, people watch sleeping individuals rise from bed, wander silently through dark houses, speak in distant voices, or move calmly beneath moonlit skies while still appearing psychologically absent. Without modern neuroscience to explain these episodes, societies often turn toward mythology, superstition, religion, or folklore in an attempt to understand what they were witnessing. Among the oldest and most widespread beliefs surrounding sleepwalking was the idea that moonlight somehow influenced the condition. Many ancient cultures associated nighttime wandering with the moon because sleepwalking often occurred under quiet, dimly lit skies where moonlight naturally became part of the atmosphere surrounding the event. The moon has always carried strong symbolic meaning throughout human history, connected with mystery, dreams, tides, madness, transformation, and the hidden rhythms of night. It therefore seemed natural to many early observers that strange nighttime behavior might somehow originate from lunar influence. Even the language surrounding these beliefs reveals how deeply the moon became connected to ideas about altered consciousness. Words related to lunacy and madness historically developed from the Latin word for moon, because many societies believed lunar cycles could disturb human thought and behavior. Sleepwalking easily became folded into these broader ideas about moon-driven changes within the mind. Stories spread, describing sleepwalkers wandering beneath silver light, as though guided unconsciously by some hidden force pulling them through the night. Modern science has found no evidence that moonlight itself directly causes sleepwalking, yet the persistence of these beliefs reveals something important about the emotional atmosphere surrounding the condition. Sleepwalking naturally feels mysterious because it combines familiar human movement with the unsettling absence of ordinary awareness. Ancient people observing these episodes without medical explanations often interpreted them through the symbolic language already associated with nighttime mystery and altered states of mind. Some cultures viewed sleepwalking with fear, while others approached it with spiritual fascination. In certain traditions, sleepwalkers were believed to travel between worlds or become temporarily vulnerable to outside supernatural influence during sleep. Other stories imagined wandering souls, dream journeys, hidden nighttime spirits, or divided consciousness moving separately from the resting body. These ideas reflected humanity's long struggle to understand what consciousness is and where the mind seems to travel during sleep. Even today, many people still experience a strangely emotional reaction to sleepwalking, despite understanding the neurological explanation scientifically. Watching someone move calmly through darkness, while remaining disconnected from ordinary awareness, still carries an eerie quality, difficult to fully remove through medical language alone. The condition touches something ancient within human psychology, because it blurs the line between presence and absence in ways people instinctively find unsettling. The old medical term somnambulism captures some of this strange poetic atmosphere remarkably well. The word comes from Latin roots, connected to sleep and walking, creating a term that sounds almost dreamlike when spoken aloud. Even before understanding its scientific meaning, many people hearing the word for the first time sense something unusual within it. Somnambulism does not sound harsh or mechanical. Instead, it carries the soft, quiet rhythm of nighttime movement and hidden consciousness, drifting somewhere beneath awareness. Language itself often preserves traces of how earlier societies emotionally experienced mysterious conditions before science fully explained them. Sleepwalking accumulated centuries of symbolic meaning because it felt so different from ordinary waking behavior. The condition seemed to reveal hidden regions of the mind inaccessible during daylight consciousness. Ancient observers naturally imagined that something larger than ordinary human awareness must be operating beneath the surface during these episodes. Many old stories describe sleepwalkers calmly navigating rooftops, narrow ledges, or dangerous terrain with uncanny balance while remaining asleep. Some of these tales became exaggerated over time through folklore and retelling, though they reflected genuine fascination with the strange abilities sleepwalkers sometimes appeared to display. Because movement patterns during sleepwalking rely heavily on deeply learned automatic systems, familiar actions may occasionally continue with surprising coordination despite incomplete awareness. To ancient observers lacking neurological explanations, such behavior could easily appear supernatural. Writers, poets, and artists throughout history also became fascinated by sleepwalking because the condition symbolized divided consciousness and hidden emotional life. Sleepwalkers appeared suspended between worlds, neither fully awake nor fully absent, moving silently through darkness, guided by forces invisible even to themselves. Literature often portrayed sleepwalking as symbolic of buried emotion, guilt, longing, secret knowledge, or the hidden complexity of the human soul. The condition therefore entered mythology not only as medical curiosity, but as a powerful metaphor for unawareness itself. Even famous historical figures were sometimes rumored to sleepwalk, though separating truth from legend remains difficult in many cases. Public fascination with unusual nighttime behavior often encouraged exaggeration and myth-making around prominent individuals. Stories about sleepwalking spread easily because the condition already carried dramatic emotional power within the public imagination. A sleepwalker seemed to reveal hidden truths about the mysterious vulnerability of human consciousness itself. As scientific understanding gradually expanded during later centuries, researchers slowly replaced supernatural explanations with neurological investigation. Physicians began observing sleepwalking more carefully, documenting patterns, family history, triggers, and behavioral characteristics across many individuals. Sleep laboratories eventually transformed understanding even further by allowing scientists to monitor brain activity directly during sleep stages and incomplete arousal episodes. Yet despite all modern advances, sleepwalking still retains much of the emotional mystery that fascinated earlier cultures. Few aspects of sleepwalking capture public attention more strongly than stories involving unusually elaborate nighttime behavior. Newspaper headlines, television documentaries, and internet discussions often focus on dramatic accounts of sleepwalkers carrying out surprisingly complex actions while still asleep. Stories circulate about people preparing meals, leaving their homes, driving cars, rearranging furniture, or performing long sequences of behavior with little or no memory afterward. These cases fascinate the public because they seem to challenge ordinary assumptions about what a sleeping brain should be capable of doing. The idea that someone could carry out coordinated activity without full awareness feels almost impossible at first glance. Most people naturally associate complex movement with deliberate thought and active decision-making. Sleepwalking disrupts this expectation by revealing how deeply automatic many human behaviors can become once they are practiced repeatedly over years of daily life. Familiar actions may continue functioning through deeply learned movement systems even when reflective awareness remains greatly reduced. Despite the public fascination surrounding dramatic cases, however, scientists emphasize that most sleepwalking episodes are far simpler and less theatrical than popular imagination suggests. The majority of sleepwalkers do not engage in highly elaborate behavior. More commonly, they may sit upright in bed, wander briefly into another room, move blankets, stand quietly in a hallway, open a door, or walk calmly through familiar spaces before eventually returning to bed again. These ordinary episodes often last only a few minutes and may involve little more than confused wandering during incomplete arousal from deep sleep. Public attention naturally gravitates toward the rarest and most unusual examples because dramatic stories are emotionally memorable. Yet focusing only on extreme cases can create misleading impressions about the condition itself. Sleepwalking usually reflects simple automatic behaviors emerging during partial awakening rather than highly intelligent deliberate planning. Researchers therefore encourage viewing the condition primarily as a neurological state transition problem rather than as evidence of hidden unconscious abilities or secret nighttime intelligence. Even relatively simple episodes, however, can still appear remarkably coordinated from the outside. A sleepwalker may navigate dark, familiar environments smoothly enough to avoid obstacles, turn corners, open doors, or interact with objects despite remaining disconnected from full waking awareness. This coordination often surprises observers because it reveals how much movement and navigation normally depend on automatic systems operating beneath conscious thought. Human beings rely on these automatic systems constantly throughout daily life. People climb stairs while thinking about unrelated subjects, walk through familiar homes in darkness, or prepare routine meals while barely paying conscious attention to each movement. Years of repetition gradually transfer many behaviors into deeply learned neurological patterns, requiring far less active awareness than most people realize. Sleepwalking partly exposes how extensive these automatic systems truly are beneath waking consciousness. Imagine a musician practicing the same piano piece thousands of times until finger movements become almost automatic. The performer no longer consciously calculates each individual note because the brain has stored the patterns deeply through repetition and habit. Familiar movement during sleepwalking may operate somewhat similarly. The body continues accessing learned routines, while reflective awareness remains incomplete and fragmented underneath. Researchers studying elaborate sleepwalking behavior often notice that even apparently complicated actions usually remain connected to familiar routines and environments rather than truly novel reasoning. Sleepwalkers tend to perform actions already deeply practiced in ordinary life. This supports the idea that automatic motor systems, rather than full conscious planning, drive much of the behavior occurring during episodes. Sleep talking frequently overlaps with sleepwalking and related nighttime conditions as well. Some sleepwalkers quietly whisper short phrases, answer simple questions vaguely, or mumble disconnected words while wandering through the environment. Sleep talking itself is extremely common and often harmless, though scientists still find it fascinating because it demonstrates yet another way partial activation can emerge during sleep. Language systems may briefly activate without full awareness or coherent conscious thought accompanying them. Most sleep talking remains simple and fragmented rather than meaningful or deeply revealing. People often imagine sleep talking exposes hidden truths buried inside the unconscious mind, though scientific evidence generally suggests the speech usually reflects incomplete arousal and partial neurological activation rather than profound psychological insight. Much like sleepwalking itself, the condition often appears stranger from the outside than it feels internally to the sleeper. These related nighttime behaviors reveal how many unusual mixed states the sleeping brain may produce under certain conditions. Sleepwalking, sleep talking, confusional arousals, and similar parasomnias all demonstrate that sleep is not a perfectly silent or inactive condition beneath the surface. Instead, the sleeping brain constantly moves through changing levels of awareness, arousal, sensory processing, and neurological coordination throughout the night. Scientists continue investigating why some individuals experience multiple related parasomnias, together more commonly than others. Many researchers suspect these conditions share underlying mechanisms involving unstable transitions between sleep stages and incomplete arousal from deep, slow-wave sleep. In vulnerable individuals, certain systems may repeatedly activate unevenly during sleep, producing different combinations of movement, speech, confusion, or partial awareness across episodes. Observers often describe sleepwalking episodes as eerie because the familiar human personality seems only partly present during the behavior. The sleepwalker may move and speak while remaining emotionally distant or psychologically disconnected at the same time. Sleep talking contributes to this impression because speech itself normally feels deeply linked to conscious thought and social awareness. Hearing fragmented words emerge from someone still trapped inside, sleep reinforces the strange sense of divided consciousness underlying many parasomnias. Scientists have become increasingly careful not to exaggerate the complexity of sleepwalking behavior, despite the dramatic public fascination surrounding certain cases. Most episodes remain relatively simple, repetitive, and connected to familiar environments. Yet even ordinary sleepwalking still reveals something extraordinary about the human brain. The condition demonstrates that movement, navigation, speech, and learned routines may continue functioning under conditions where reflective consciousness remains severely incomplete. This realization challenges deeply rooted assumptions about the relationship between awareness and behavior. People naturally prefer believing every meaningful action must arise directly from conscious intention. Sleepwalking suggests the brain contains powerful automatic systems capable of functioning independently in limited ways during altered states of consciousness. Those systems normally remain hidden beneath waking awareness, quietly supporting countless daily routines without drawing attention to themselves. Sleepwalking is only one example of the many unusual conditions that can emerge from the sleeping brain during the night. Researchers studying parasomnias have discovered that human sleep contains a surprisingly wide range of incomplete arousal states where movement, emotion, awareness, memory, and perception become temporarily disrupted in unusual ways. Among the most dramatic of these related conditions are night terrors, episodes that can appear deeply frightening to observers, even though the sleeper often remembers little or nothing afterward. Night terrors occur most commonly in children, though adults may experience them as well. During an episode, a sleeper may suddenly sit upright in bed, cry out loudly, breathe rapidly, appear terrified, or move with intense agitation while remaining deeply disconnected from waking awareness. To family members witnessing the event, the reaction may look like extreme panic or fear, yet the person often remains trapped inside a confused, incomplete state between deep sleep and wakefulness, rather than consciously experiencing the environment normally. Scientists believe night terrors and sleepwalking share important neurological similarities because both conditions usually emerge from deep non-REM slow-wave sleep. In both cases, the brain appears partially waking without fully restoring conscious awareness. The difference lies mainly in how the incomplete arousal expresses itself behaviorally. Sleepwalking often produces calmer movement and wandering, while night terrors involve stronger emotional activation, confusion, and visible physiological arousal. These conditions reveal how many forms incomplete awakening can take during deep sleep. The sleeping brain does not always transition smoothly or uniformly between unconsciousness and wakefulness. Instead, certain systems may reactivate unevenly, while others remain reduced underneath. Movement systems, emotional circuits, breathing patterns, sensory processing, and awareness may all shift at different speeds during arousal. The result creates strange overlapping states where waking and sleeping coexist imperfectly for brief periods during the night. Night terrors especially demonstrate how physically active the sleeping body can become, even without full awareness. During episodes, the heart may race, sweating may increase, breathing may become rapid, and the sleeper may appear intensely frightened, despite remaining largely disconnected from the outside environment. Family members often attempt to comfort the person, only to discover that meaningful communication remains difficult or impossible until consciousness gradually returns afterward. Much like sleepwalking, night terrors often leave little clear memory once the episode ends. The sleeper may wake feeling confused or exhausted without understanding why others appear alarmed. Researchers believe memory systems remain heavily suppressed during these incomplete arousal states, preventing stable conscious recollection from forming normally. The body therefore experiences intense physical activation, while reflective awareness remains fragmented and incomplete. These related conditions still fascinate scientists because they reveal how dynamic sleep truly is beneath the appearance of stillness. Most people imagine sleep as passive, unconscious inactivity, where the body simply rests quietly until morning. Modern neuroscience paints a very different picture. During sleep, the brain remains highly active, cycling continuously through changing states of awareness, restoration, emotional processing, hormonal regulation, sensory filtering, and neurological coordination across the entire night. Even quiet bedrooms contain enormous hidden activity beneath the surface of sleep. Billions of neurons exchange electrical signals constantly, while memories reorganize themselves, immune systems regulate inflammation, emotional experiences become processed, breathing rhythms remain coordinated, and countless physiological systems maintain delicate balance through the night. The sleeping brain never truly shuts down. Instead, it enters highly organized shifting states, requiring remarkable stability and coordination. Conditions like sleepwalking and night terrors reveal what happens when portions of this coordination become temporarily unstable during deep sleep transitions. Certain systems begin emerging toward wakefulness, while others remain trapped inside slow-wave sleep. Movement may activate without awareness. Emotion may surge without coherent understanding. Sensory systems may partly respond, while reflective thought remains absent. These mixed states expose the extraordinary complexity hidden beneath ordinary sleep every night. This layered structure may explain why sleep remains one of the most mysterious subjects in neuroscience, even after decades of research. Scientists understand far more about sleep than previous generations ever could, yet many fundamental questions remain unresolved. Why does consciousness fade gradually during sleep instead of instantly disappearing? How exactly does the brain generate subjective awareness from electrical activity? Why do certain individuals experience unstable arousal, while others remain completely stable through the night? These questions continue challenging researchers because consciousness itself remains deeply difficult to define scientifically. The mystery becomes even more striking when considering how universal sleep truly is. Every human being sleeps. Every night, billions of minds pass repeatedly through changing stages of awareness and unconsciousness with astonishing regularity. Yet despite spending nearly 1/3 of life asleep, people still understand only fragments of the processes unfolding inside the brain during those hours. Sleepwalking and related parasomnias briefly expose that hidden world by making invisible neurological transitions visible through physical behavior. Ancient cultures often interpreted these conditions through mythology because they recognized something profoundly unusual about them long before modern neuroscience existed. Today, scientists explain sleepwalking and night terrors through incomplete arousal, deep, slow-wave sleep, mixed states of consciousness, and unstable transitions between sleep stages. Yet even modern explanations preserve a sense of wonder because the conditions reveal how remarkably flexible and layered human consciousness may be. Some researchers compare sleep to an enormous hidden landscape, continuously shifting beneath awareness each night. Most of the time, people travel through this landscape smoothly without noticing its complexity. Parasomnias occur when parts of the brain briefly lose synchronization during those transitions, creating strange overlaps between sleeping and waking states. These overlaps remind scientists that consciousness is not fixed and absolute, but fluid, dynamic, and surprisingly delicate beneath ordinary experience. The more researchers investigate sleep, the clearer it becomes that quiet nighttime rest involves far more activity than anyone once imagined. Beneath closed eyes, the brain remains alive with movement, regulation, communication, and changing forms of awareness every moment of the night. Most sleepers remain peacefully still, while these enormous processes unfold invisibly underneath. Yet conditions like sleepwalking and night terrors occasionally allow glimpses into that hidden activity, exposing the remarkable neurological world operating silently beneath human sleep. The human brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons connected through networks so vast and complicated that even modern neuroscience still struggles to fully understand how they operate together. Every thought, memory, emotion, movement, dream, sensation, and awareness emerges from electrical and chemical communication flowing constantly between these enormous populations of cells. At every moment, countless signals travel through the brain simultaneously, while different regions coordinate awareness, perception, memory, language, balance, movement, and emotional processing with astonishing precision. Most people rarely stop to consider how extraordinary this coordination truly is, because consciousness normally feels seamless and stable from the inside. A person opens their eyes in the morning, already feeling like a unified, continuous self, moving naturally through the world. Walking across a room, recognizing familiar faces, understanding language, remembering the past, planning the future, and navigating physical space all happen so effortlessly that the underlying neurological complexity remains invisible during ordinary life. Sleepwalking briefly exposes what happens when portions of this enormous coordination become uneven during deep sleep. Instead of all major systems shifting together cleanly between unconsciousness and wakefulness, some networks appear to partially activate while others remain asleep underneath. Movement systems may begin functioning while reflective awareness remains reduced. Navigation patterns may continue operating while memory formation stays heavily suppressed. The result creates one of the clearest examples in human biology, showing that consciousness may not function as one indivisible thing at all. Researchers studying sleepwalking often focus less on the visible movement itself and more on the deeper question of how such uneven activation becomes possible inside a healthy human brain. Under normal waking conditions, billions of neurons synchronize activity continuously across many regions. Awareness feels unified because these systems communicate with remarkable stability and coordination. During sleepwalking, that coordination temporarily fragments into uneven layers, where some systems emerge toward wakefulness, while others remain trapped inside deep, slow-wave sleep. Scientists sometimes compare this process to an orchestra, where certain sections suddenly begin playing while others remain silent. The comparison captures the strange mixed quality of sleepwalking remarkably well. Imagine hearing percussion and strings begin moving through familiar melodies, while the conductor and several major sections of the orchestra never fully join the performance. Parts of the music continue operating in recognizable ways, yet the larger unified coordination, normally creating a complete symphony, remains incomplete and fragmented. Sleepwalking may resemble something similar occurring neurologically inside the brain. Certain movement-related systems partially activate, while regions connected to reflective awareness, stable memory formation, and conscious self-observation remain reduced. The body therefore continues carrying out familiar routines, while full awareness never completely arrives. This orchestra analogy also helps explain why sleepwalking behavior often appears coordinated, yet strangely limited at the same time. Sleepwalkers can frequently navigate familiar environments, avoid obstacles, open doors, or perform simple learned actions because deeply practiced motor systems continue functioning underneath. Yet the person may struggle to engage meaningfully in conversation, reason clearly, or form stable memories because higher reflective systems remain incomplete. Human beings depend on these layered systems constantly during waking life without realizing how specialized and interconnected they truly are. Walking alone requires enormous coordination between balance centers, sensory systems, muscle control, spatial mapping, visual processing, and automatic movement patterns learned gradually over many years. Most of this coordination happens beneath conscious attention because the brain quietly manages the details automatically once behaviors become familiar. Sleepwalking reveals how powerfully these automatic systems can continue operating even when consciousness itself becomes fragmented. Familiar movement patterns may emerge from deeply established neural pathways, requiring far less reflective awareness than people normally assume. A person can therefore move through the environment while still remaining psychologically distant and disconnected from waking consciousness. Researchers investigating mixed states of consciousness continue finding evidence that the brain may operate far more flexibly than earlier generations believed possible. Different regions do not always share identical levels of activation at the same moment. Certain sensory systems may partially awaken while emotional processing remains reduced. Movement networks may become active while memory systems remain asleep. Sleepwalking therefore demonstrates how consciousness can separate into uneven neurological layers rather than functioning as one simple unified condition. The sleeping brain itself remains highly active throughout the night despite outward stillness. During deep sleep, billions of neurons continue exchanging signals constantly while regulating breathing, processing memories, restoring tissue, organizing emotional information, and coordinating countless physiological systems beneath awareness. Sleep is not passive shutdown. It is one of the most neurologically dynamic conditions the human body experiences. Modern brain imaging has allowed scientists to study some of these patterns with increasing detail over recent decades. Researchers observing sleepwalking episodes have found evidence suggesting that motor and sensory regions may show heightened activation, while frontal regions connected to executive awareness remain more heavily suppressed. This uneven neurological landscape helps explain why the sleepwalker can physically move through the world without fully understanding or consciously reflecting on those movements afterward. The orchestra comparison becomes especially useful here because consciousness itself may depend less on isolated brain regions and more on synchronized communication between many systems operating together simultaneously. Under healthy waking conditions, the performance remains coordinated enough that awareness feels unified and continuous. During sleepwalking, portions of the orchestra continue functioning, while the larger synchronization weakens temporarily. This possibility continues fascinating researchers because it challenges simplistic ideas about what it means to be awake. Open eyes, movement, and environmental interaction alone do not necessarily guarantee full consciousness. Likewise, unconsciousness itself may not represent complete neurological silence. Sleepwalking occupies a strange middle territory, where fragments of wakefulness and deep sleep overlap unevenly inside the same brain at the same time. The deeper scientists investigate these conditions, the more they realize how little humanity still fully understands about consciousness, despite all modern technological advances. The human brain remains the most complicated structure known in nature. Every night it passes repeatedly through shifting states of awareness while maintaining astonishing stability most of the time. Sleepwalking briefly reveals what happens when parts of that stability loosen during transitions between deep sleep and wakefulness. Even ordinary sleep now appears far more mysterious than earlier generations imagined. Beneath quiet bedrooms, billions of neurons continue communicating through constantly changing electrical rhythms all night long, while consciousness rises and falls through layered neurological states still only partly understood. Sleepwalking allows rare glimpses into these hidden transitions by exposing the seams between sleeping and waking directly through behavior. Perhaps this is why the condition continues captivating scientists and ordinary observers alike. Sleepwalking reveals that consciousness may not be a simple single condition, but rather a coordinated performance involving countless systems operating together across the brain. Most nights, the orchestra remains beautifully synchronized beneath sleep and wakefulness. Yet during incomplete arousal states, some sections briefly begin playing, before the full performance of conscious awareness completely returns. For many years, people described sleepwalking as though it involved waking up inside sleep itself, almost like a person becoming conscious while the body remained trapped in a dreamlike condition. Modern neuroscience now approaches the phenomenon very differently. Researchers increasingly believe sleepwalking is not truly wakefulness occurring during sleep, but rather an incomplete awakening where only certain systems inside the brain begin emerging toward consciousness, while others remain asleep underneath. This distinction may sound subtle at first, yet it changes the entire scientific understanding of the condition. Sleepwalking is no longer viewed simply as bizarre nighttime behavior. Instead, it has become a neurological puzzle involving arousal, awareness, movement, and the architecture of consciousness itself. Scientists now ask not only why the body moves during sleep, but how different parts of the brain can temporarily exist in different states of activation at the same time. The phrase incomplete awakening captures this idea more accurately because the sleepwalker never fully reaches conscious awareness during the episode. Certain systems partially reactivate while others remain suppressed. Movement may return before reflective thought. Navigation may function while memory formation remains reduced. The eyes may open and gather information from the environment, while deeper self-awareness still remains trapped beneath slow-wave sleep. Researchers studying these mixed states often emphasize that waking itself is not an instant event, but a gradual neurological transition involving enormous coordination across many systems simultaneously. Every morning, consciousness quietly rebuilds itself layer by layer as the brain shifts from deep sleep into ordinary awareness. Most of the time, this process unfolds so smoothly that people barely notice it happening at all. Sleepwalking appears to occur when parts of this transition become uneven or fragmented during deep sleep arousal. Imagine an enormous city slowly regaining power before dawn after a nighttime blackout. Certain neighborhoods begin lighting up first, while others remain dark and silent for longer periods. Traffic systems may partially restart, while communication networks still remain offline elsewhere. Sleepwalking may resemble something similar occurring neurologically inside the brain. Some systems emerge toward wakefulness, while others remain deeply disconnected beneath sleep. This uneven activation explains why sleepwalkers often appear strangely suspended between consciousness and unconsciousness. They may physically move through familiar surroundings while remaining psychologically distant at the same time. Responses may sound vague, emotionally flat, or confused because the systems supporting reflective awareness have not fully reassembled into waking consciousness yet. Scientists increasingly view sleepwalking as evidence that consciousness itself may be more layered and flexible than earlier generations realized. Human awareness does not appear to function like a simple switch turning completely on or off. Instead, consciousness may emerge gradually from coordination across many systems communicating together. During incomplete awakening, these systems lose synchronization temporarily, creating unusual combinations of movement, perception, awareness, and memory. The scientific study of sleepwalking reflects a much larger pattern found throughout the history of science itself. Conditions once viewed through mythology, fear, or supernatural explanation gradually become neurological and physiological questions investigated carefully through observation and evidence. Ancient cultures explained sleepwalking through moonlight, spirits, wandering souls, enchantment, or hidden nighttime forces because no better framework existed at the time. Modern researchers approach the same phenomenon through sleep laboratories, electrical recordings, brain imaging, and arousal studies. Yet even as science replaces mythology with neuroscience, the condition remains deeply fascinating because the mystery itself never completely disappears. Sleepwalking continues forcing difficult questions about what consciousness truly is and how awareness emerges from the brain. Science transforms the phenomenon from supernatural mystery into neurological puzzle, yet the puzzle itself remains extraordinarily profound. Researchers now understand that deep slow-wave sleep plays a central role in most sleepwalking episodes. During this stage, large networks of neurons synchronize into slower rhythms while awareness becomes reduced. Sleepwalking appears when the brain begins partially arousing from this deep condition without completing the transition fully into wakefulness. Certain systems connected to movement and environmental interaction become activated, while deeper reflective awareness remains incomplete. This framework helps explain why sleepwalking behavior often appears both coordinated and strangely limited at the same time. The sleepwalker can navigate familiar environments and perform simple learned routines because automatic movement systems partially function during incomplete arousal. Yet the person usually struggles with complex reasoning, emotional engagement, stable conversation, or later memory formation because higher conscious systems remain suppressed. Scientists studying incomplete awakening have also become interested in how similar mixed states may appear across many other sleep-related conditions. Sleep paralysis, confusional arousals, certain anesthesia experiences, night terrors, and hypnagogic hallucinations all involve unusual overlaps between waking and sleeping systems in different combinations. Sleepwalking belongs to this broader family of conditions, revealing how fluid the boundaries of consciousness may be beneath ordinary experience. This fluidity challenges deeply rooted assumptions about awareness itself. Most people naturally imagine consciousness as something solid and absolute. A person should either be awake or asleep, with no meaningful territory existing between those states. Sleepwalking demonstrates that the brain does not always obey such clean divisions. Instead, awareness may shift gradually through intermediate forms and incomplete transitions before stabilizing again. The more researchers investigate these conditions, the more sleep begins to resemble a continuously changing neurological landscape, rather than one passive unconscious state. Beneath quiet bedrooms, the brain moves constantly through rhythms, transitions, and shifting levels of awareness all night long. Most nights, these changes remain beautifully coordinated and invisible. Sleepwalking briefly exposes the hidden complexity beneath that coordination by making incomplete awakening physically visible through movement and behavior. Scientists continue refining theories explaining exactly why certain individuals experience unstable arousal, while others remain stable throughout deep sleep. Genetics, stress, exhaustion, fever, medications, irregular schedules, and neurological vulnerability all appear capable of influencing these transitions. Yet despite decades of progress, many important questions still remain unanswered because consciousness itself remains one of the least understood subjects in neuroscience. One of the most persistent myths surrounding sleepwalking is the belief that waking a sleepwalker is somehow extremely dangerous. Many people grow up hearing warnings that a sleepwalker should never be awakened under any circumstances because doing so could supposedly cause shock, injury, psychological damage, or even permanent harm. These ideas became deeply rooted in popular culture through movies, television, folklore, and repeated storytelling across generations. Yet modern sleep research paints a far calmer and more practical picture of what happens during most sleepwalking episodes. Scientists have found no evidence that waking a sleepwalker causes catastrophic harm simply because the person was asleep while moving. The real concern during an episode is usually not the act of awakening itself, but the confusion and disorientation that may accompany incomplete arousal from deep sleep. Sleepwalkers often remain trapped in a mixed state between sleeping and waking, so sudden interruption may leave them startled, frightened, or briefly confused, while consciousness reorganizes itself fully. For this reason, researchers and sleep specialists generally emphasize calm guidance and safety rather than dramatic fear surrounding the act of waking. If a sleepwalker appears safe and can be gently redirected toward bed, many experts recommend guiding the person quietly without creating unnecessary alarm. Speaking softly, avoiding sudden confrontation, and reducing environmental danger usually matters far more than the old superstition that waking itself is dangerous. This calmer scientific approach reflects the broader modern understanding of sleepwalking as incomplete awakening rather than supernatural trance or divided consciousness. The sleepwalker is not trapped in some fragile, mystical condition where interruption destroys the mind. Instead, the brain remains partially asleep and partially active at the same time. Abrupt awakening may therefore create temporary confusion because full awareness has not completely returned yet. though the confusion itself is generally brief and manageable. Many people have experienced smaller examples of this same disorientation after being awakened suddenly from deep sleep. Someone may wake confused about the time, uncertain of their surroundings, or mentally foggy for several moments before awareness fully stabilizes. Sleepwalking involves much deeper, incomplete arousal, so confusion during interruption can feel stronger and more dramatic. Yet this does not mean the person suffers lasting harm simply from being awakened. The persistence of the old myth likely reflects how emotionally strange sleepwalking appears to observers. Watching someone move through the environment with open eyes while remaining psychologically distant naturally creates anxiety and uncertainty. Earlier generations lacking scientific explanations often interpreted the condition through fear, superstition, or exaggerated caution. Over time, these ideas hardened into warnings repeated so often that many people accepted them unquestioningly. Modern sleep science, instead, focuses heavily on practical safety because physical risk during episodes represents the most important concern for individuals who sleepwalk frequently. Sleepwalkers may trip over furniture, leave the house unintentionally, fall down stairs, interact with dangerous objects, or wander into unsafe environments while awareness remains severely limited. Researchers therefore study environmental protection carefully as part of long-term management strategies for recurrent sleepwalking. Simple environmental adjustments can greatly reduce risk during episodes. Families may secure doors and windows, remove sharp obstacles, place alarms near exits, block stairways, or create calmer sleeping environments to minimize hazards. In children, these precautions are often temporary because many eventually outgrow sleepwalking naturally as the brain matures and deep sleep becomes more stable over time. Scientists studying these protective measures have become increasingly interested in how sleep environments influence incomplete arousal states themselves. Stable sleep schedules, reduced sleep deprivation, stress management, and consistent nighttime routines may all help reduce instability during deep, slow-wave sleep. Researchers now view sleepwalking less as isolated bizarre behavior and more as part of a broader problem involving sleep regulation and neurological stability throughout the night. This perspective changes how families and clinicians approach the condition emotionally as well. Earlier generations often viewed sleepwalking through fear or supernatural suspicion because the behavior seemed impossible and frightening. Modern neuroscience frames the condition as a neurological state transition disorder involving incomplete arousal from deep sleep. The behavior still appears strange, yet understanding the underlying mechanisms allows people to respond more calmly and rationally. Researchers also emphasize that not every sleepwalking episode requires immediate awakening or intervention. Many episodes remain brief and harmless, especially in familiar, safe environments. Some sleepwalkers simply sit upright in bed, wander quietly into another room, or stand briefly before returning to sleep naturally. Observers often become more frightened than the sleepwalker themselves because the visual appearance of divided consciousness feels unsettling. Part of what makes sleepwalking emotionally powerful is the contradiction it creates between movement and awareness. The body appears awake enough to navigate physical space, while the mind remains psychologically distant underneath. Witnessing this contradiction naturally triggers concern, because people instinctively associate coordinated movement with conscious understanding. Sleepwalking reveals that familiar automatic systems can continue functioning even when reflective awareness remains incomplete. Scientists continue researching why some individuals experience recurrent episodes despite environmental adjustments and healthy sleep habits. Genetics, neurological vulnerability, stress, illness, medications, exhaustion, and irregular sleep schedules may all influence how stable deep sleep remains throughout the night. In some cases, clinicians may investigate whether additional sleep disorders or medical conditions contribute to frequent episodes as well. The modern scientific response therefore focuses not on fear, but on understanding and protection. Sleepwalking may look mysterious, yet researchers now recognize it as part of the brain's delicate regulation of arousal and awareness during deep sleep. Calm guidance, environmental safety, stable sleep routines, and careful observation matter far more than old myths warning of catastrophic consequences from awakening a sleepwalker. The true challenge lies not in the act of waking itself, but in understanding the remarkable neurological complexity hidden beneath human sleep every night. The deeper scientists investigate sleepwalking, the clearer it becomes that the condition is not simply about nighttime wandering at all. Sleepwalking reveals something much larger about the human mind itself. Beneath waking awareness exists an enormous hidden system of shifting neurological states, automatic behaviors, layered consciousness, and delicate transitions that most people never notice during daily life. The condition feels mysterious because it briefly exposes those hidden layers directly through physical behavior. Modern neuroscience has uncovered remarkable details about sleep over recent decades. Researchers can now monitor electrical brain activity, observe changing sleep stages, study incomplete arousal states, and map patterns of neurological activation with technology earlier generations could barely imagine. Scientists understand far more about deep slow-wave sleep, memory processing, sleep cycles, and parasomnias than ever before in human history. Yet despite all these advances, some of the deepest questions surrounding consciousness itself still remain unanswered. Why does awareness emerge at all from billions of communicating neurons? How does the brain create the feeling of being a conscious self moving through the world? Why do some systems awaken before others during incomplete arousal? Why does one person experience sleepwalking while another remains neurologically stable under similar conditions? These questions continue challenging researchers because consciousness remains one of the most difficult mysteries in all science. Sleepwalking occupies a uniquely important place within that mystery because it reveals the boundaries between sleeping and waking are far softer and more flexible than most people ever imagine. The brain does not always move cleanly between unconsciousness and awareness. Instead, consciousness may shift gradually through many intermediate forms hidden beneath ordinary experience. Sleepwalking briefly exposes one of those hidden forms where movement, awareness, memory, and perception stop functioning together in perfect synchronization. The condition demonstrates that the sleeping brain remains highly active even during the quietest hours of the night. Beneath still bedrooms and dark houses, billions of neurons continue exchanging electrical and chemical signals continuously while sleep cycles rise and fall across changing levels of depth and awareness. Memories reorganize themselves, emotional experiences become processed, hormones regulate countless internal systems, breathing rhythms remain coordinated, immune activity continues working silently beneath consciousness. Sleep is not passive absence, but one of the most active neurological conditions the brain experiences. Most nights, these enormous processes remain beautifully coordinated and invisible. People drift through sleep without noticing the complexity unfolding underneath awareness. Sleepwalking briefly exposes what happens when portions of this coordination become unstable during transitions between deep sleep and wakefulness. Automatic movement systems partially activate while reflective awareness remains reduced. The body moves through the world while the conscious mind lingers somewhere deeper beneath slow-wave sleep. Researchers now believe these mixed states may hold valuable clues about the true architecture of consciousness itself. Awareness may not function as one indivisible condition, but rather as many interconnected systems communicating together across the brain. During waking life, these systems remain synchronized closely enough that consciousness feels unified and stable. Sleepwalking reveals what may happen when synchronization weakens and fragments into uneven layers. This realization changes how many scientists think about human awareness more broadly. Consciousness may behave less like a fixed switch and more like shifting weather patterns moving continuously across the neurological landscape of the brain. Different forms of awareness may overlap, fade, emerge, and reorganize themselves throughout sleep in ways people rarely consciously experience directly. Sleepwalking provides one of the clearest windows into these strange intermediate territories between sleeping and waking. Ancient cultures sensed the mystery surrounding these conditions long before neuroscience existed. Stories involving moonlight, wandering souls, divided consciousness, enchantment, or supernatural nighttime journeys reflected humanity's early attempts to explain behavior that seemed impossible within ordinary understanding of the mind. Modern science no longer explains sleepwalking through mythology, yet the condition still inspires wonder, because the neurological reality may be even more extraordinary than the old stories themselves. A person rises from bed with open eyes while remaining asleep underneath. Familiar movement continues without full reflective awareness. Memory afterward may vanish completely. The sleeping brain partially awakens while consciousness itself remains incomplete. Few experiences reveal the layered complexity of the human mind more clearly than this strange overlap between sleeping and waking. Scientists will likely continue studying sleepwalking for many decades because the condition touches questions far larger than the behavior alone. Sleepwalking forces researchers to confront the unstable boundaries of awareness itself. The condition demonstrates that consciousness may contain hidden intermediate states rarely visible during ordinary life. It reminds humanity that even the most familiar experiences such as sleep still contain mysteries science has not fully solved. Thank you for listening to the Sleepy Mind channel. I hope you enjoyed learning about why we sleepwalk and the hidden complexity of the sleeping brain.